Hello and welcome to one of two Scratch instructional videos for this week's class. In this video, we're going to look specifically at the motion code blocks. They basically have to do with two things: where a sprite is on the stage and what direction a sprite is facing on the stage. Certainly we can set those things manually, as we saw in the sprite information area, but if we want these things to change as part of a project, then we need to script their locations as well. The motion code blocks are in dark blue. They are right at the top of the list. And I'm going to take a look at all but one of them. We're not going to look at the if on edge bounce one, at least for now, but we will take a look at the rest of the blocks that are available in this section. So to get started, I'm going to start with the group that's at the top here, and they do kind of have them grouped together visually because they do kind of work together. These are probably the simplest ways to get a sprite to move on the screen, because really all they do is think about forward motion and what direction is being faced. So to start with this move one, I'll drag over here. I've got one sprite in this project, just our friend the Scrat Cat. And the block simply has one thing you can put in, which is how many steps. And steps doesn't mean like the cat is going to take 10 steps. It means pixels. And if you remember, our work area is 480 pixels wide by 240 pixels tall. So by moving 10 steps, that's moving, what would that be? 1/48th of the width across the screen. So if I click on this right here, you will see that the Scratch Cat moves, and every time I click it, it moves about a 48th of the width of the screen across. This command doesn't have any direction to it. It always moves in the direction that the sprite is pointed in. Which for some sprites like this, which has a face, that's sort of easy to know. If it's a more abstract sprite like a shape or something, then you may need to play around a little bit to make sure it's pointed in the right direction. But this one will only move the sprite forward in whatever direction it's pointed in. So then obviously the next thing we want to be able to do is to change its direction. And the two instructions that go with that move one are the turn instructions. I don't want you to snap together. Are the turn instructions, and they're identical except one turns clockwise and one turns counterclockwise. And it turns by degrees. So turning 180 degrees would flip this in exactly the other direction. Now this is rotating it. I'll talk a little bit about how to make it maybe not rotate if you don't want it to. But say, for example, I want to turn 90 degrees clockwise. I would type in 90, and when I click on it, now my Scrat Cat has turned 90 degrees. And now if I do the move 10 steps, it'll be moving in that direction because now the sprite is facing that way. I'll turn it this way. Let's go 180 degrees. So it's faced the other direction, and again, now it's walking that way. So these three are really kind of quick and easy ways to get a sprite to move and to turn. There's not a lot of specificity to them or control over them, but if they get the job done, then there's no reason to go any more complicated than that. All right, so those three, we'll leave those parked up there. And actually, let me return my Scrat Cat back to the middle, just so that we're starting from scratch. There we go. All right, so the next set of 4 directions, and I'll go ahead and just pull all 4 of these in here now. It's 2 pairs. They're identical in that the first one in each case will take your sprite to a named location on the screen, and the other 2 will take them to a location on the screen that you specify by X and Y coordinates. So the go to a place give you a pull down menu of options. Actually, I'm going to put one more sprite up here on the screen just to show what some of this does. So if I do go to, I can go to a random position, and that is just what it says. Every time I click it, it'll go somewhere randomly on the screen. I can go to the mouse pointer, and what that will do, this will be a little weird because my mouse pointer is over here, but it tried to go as far as it could towards my mouse pointer. If I were to put a trigger on this, then when that trigger happened, it would try to go to wherever my mouse pointer was on the screen. So that's another option. And then whatever other sprites are in your project will also show up in this list. So this is a way to have a sprite immediately go to where another sprite is. So if I say go to the apple, then it'll put my scratch cat right where the apple is. So those are 3 ways to kind of go to named locations. The other version of that is gliding. Gliding is exactly the same as go to, except that it will move to that location over a certain amount of time. That's what they call a glide. So I could say go over the course of 2 seconds, go to a random position. And so it'll pick a random position, and then it will take 2 seconds to go to that random position. And again, you have the same options of mouse pointer. I could have it glide to the apple in 2 seconds. So that's just a way to make a movement a little bit smoother. So either snap to where the location is or glide to where the location is. The other 2 are exactly the same, except that here you are actually giving it the X and Y coordinate. X, as you remember or should know, is going left to right or horizontally, and Y is going vertically. And again, we're 480 pixels wide, but 0 is in the middle. So your X can go from minus 240 to plus 240, and your Y can go from 120 to minus 120. So all you do is plug in what numbers you want. I'm just picking a couple numbers at random, and then I click on that and it snaps the sprite to that location. I can do the same thing with gliding. I can specify a location. Let's see, let's go negative here. So minus 120, minus 30, and now it will glide to that location. So these 4 kind of work as a group as well. Either you want it to go somewhere named, or you want to go somewhere that is specified by X and Y coordinates. So if those 2 are the more in-depth version of this moving one, then these next 2 are more in-depth versions of the turn ones. You have point in direction and point towards. And point in direction, this just means it will rotate the sprite to whatever that setting is. So I can say rotate it to, let's go to negative 135 degrees. And when I click on it, now my scratch cat will face minus 135 degrees. So you've got a little picker here, or you can also type the number in if you want as well. So that allows you to just specify exactly what direction you want it to point. The other one is kind of like the gliding towards or going towards ones. In fact, I'll stack them up this way. And here again, you've got mouse pointer, but it'll also list any of the other sprites on the screen. So if I say point towards the apple, when I execute that, then the cat will point itself towards the apple. So that can be a way to have something change its direction so that it's always facing something on the screen. All right, so those 2 work together as well. The next 4, there are a lot of groupings of these. The next 4, again, kind of work in 2 pairs. And these also have to do with the XY location. But what they do is allow you to set just the X or the Y. So as opposed to this one up here where you had to specify both, if you just want to change one or the other and leave the other one alone, you can use the set to X or set to Y just to change that one direction of it. So I could just change the X to, let's go to 75, and it'll leave the Y at whatever the Y is, but it will move the X to 75. So you have those two as sort of separate items like this go-to. And then the change is kind of like the go-to or the move, because it goes off of wherever it is now and just moves by that amount. So if I change X by 10, every time I click it, it's going to move on the X by 10. I'm going to set this to minus 25, and every time I click on it, it will go, oh, let me go positive 25. Oh, that's going to work off the screen. If I go positive 25, now every time I click it, the sprite is moving by 25. So that is another way to incrementally change from wherever the sprite happens to be to get it to move. And you can obviously change both at the same time by stacking, and then you will get, let me do this, minus, and then you will get diagonal motion. Any math teachers out there will know that kind of what we're doing here is specifying a slope. So you can stack them together and have both the X and the Y change. All right, and then the very last one for this segment is this set rotational style. And this you only have to do once for a sprite. Once you set it, the sprite will keep that style. So unless you want the style to change, you don't have to do this more than once. And this basically just has to do with what happens when you rotate the sprite. Because the cat, obviously, if I rotate the sprite 180 degrees, the cat is a little weird now because he's now walking on his head. So what this allows you to do is to say how you want the drawing to behave when you rotate the sprite. So the sprite will still rotate. The question is whether the graphic of the sprite will rotate to show that. So if I'm in all around, which is the default, then that's what we've been seeing, where the sprite rotates to face whatever direction. If I set it to left and right, now what happens is it will, I didn't actually set it. There we go. So set rotation. So now as I'm changing the degrees, the sprite only changes to face either left or right. So right now the rotation is minus 88, but the sprite is pointing straight to the left. So if I were to move it, it's moving in the direction. Or if I go here, now it should be moving in 2. So it's moving up, but the sprite is facing to the right. So basically, it only lets the sprite face either left or right. Anywhere else in between, it will round off, if you think of it that way, to one of those directions. And then the other way is don't rotate at all. And what this will do is it doesn't matter what you do to the rotation. Oh, I have to activate it. There we go. It doesn't matter what you do to the rotation of the sprite will always face the same direction. Just its direction of motion can change. So if it's something like a circle, it doesn't really matter because a circle doesn't look any different when it's rotated. But a lot of these sprites that look like characters or objects, you may not want them to actually flip upside down if you're moving them around or rotating them for their direction. So, all right, so that whole collection basically gives us all of our list of commands for telling a sprite where to go and what direction to face. We've got a generic set that very quickly will allow you to move a sprite just in a forward direction and to turn it clockwise or counterclockwise. You have a set of directions that allow you to move the sprite to a location on the screen, either a named location or another sprite, or a specified XY location. We can change the direction of the sprite either by a number or again by specifying sort of a target direction. We can change only the Y or X if we want to and leave the other coordinate alone. And then we have this ability to change the rotational style of the sprite. And that's basically it. The if on edge bounce, if you want to read up on that, you can. We're not going to get into that right now because it goes a little beyond what we need to know right now. And we will actually pretty quickly next week get to what these round reporters are. But we're not going to take a look at those yet. So that is basically everything in the motion category. I would suggest taking some time to just play around with them. You can do them like I've been doing them, where you just trigger them by clicking on them. If you want to combine them with some of our event triggers that we looked at last week, you can do that. So you can set it up so that when you push the right arrow, it moves to the right. And if you push the left arrow, it moves to the left. So all sorts of things that you can do there. So play around with that some. Contact me if you have questions. And when you feel comfortable with the motion, then you'll be moving on to the second part of the lesson, which has to do with some controls, some looping and some conditionals, and a couple of sensing operations as well. And that will help you actually animate movement instead of having to click, 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 click. You'll be able to actually set up something that animates movements. All right, so that's it for this video. I will see you in the next one.